The house was quiet, too quiet for a family that once buzzed with laughter and warmth. I sat on the worn-out couch, clutching a faded photograph of the four of us, Mom, Dad, my little sister, and me. The smiles frozen in time felt like a cruel joke now, a reminder of what we had lost. My name is Emily, and for as long as I can remember, my family was my entire world. We were close, or at least we used to be. But over the last few years, everything changed. The distance grew, conversations became sparse and tense, and the warmth that once held us together faded into silence. It started when Dad lost his job. The bills piled up, the stress seeped into every corner of our lives, and the arguments began. Not the kind of fights that end with apologies and hugs, but bitter silences and cold stares. Mom tried to hold everything together, but even her smile started to crack. School was no refuge either. I could feel the eyes of my classmates on me, whispers trailing behind as I walked down the hall. "Your family's falling apart," they'd say. I hated it, but I didn't know how to fix it. How do you mend a family when everyone seems to be breaking in their own way? The unspoken tension clung to us like a shadow. Meals were eaten in silence. TV shows played to empty rooms. My sister Lily retreated into her own world, her laughter a rare and precious sound. Amidst this quiet storm, I found solace in a box of old letters and mementos my grandmother had left behind. One envelope caught my eye. A letter addressed to my parents, dated years ago, but never sent. The handwriting was delicate, filled with emotion I could almost feel. That unsent letter became my anchor in the chaos. A whisper from the past, hinting at secrets and love that might still heal us. As I held that letter, a spark of hope flickered inside me. Maybe, just maybe, this forgotten message was the key to saving the family I feared was lost forever. Little did I know, opening that letter would set in motion a journey none of us expected. A journey through pain, forgiveness, and the rediscovery of what truly binds us together. The moment I decided to share the unsent letter with my family, I felt a mix of hope and dread. Would it reopen wounds, or could it finally bring us closer? It was a chilly evening when I gathered Mom, Dad, and Lily in the living room. The house felt heavy, the silence louder than ever. I held the letter in my hands, my fingers trembling. "I found this," I began softly. "It's a letter Mom's mother wrote to you before she passed. It was never sent." My parents exchanged glances, a mix of surprise, hesitation, and something I couldn't quite read. Mom reached out and took the letter, unfolding it carefully, as if touching something fragile and sacred. Her eyes filled with tears as she read aloud the words penned decades ago. Words of love, regret, and a plea for understanding. My grandmother spoke of family struggles, missed chances, and the hope that her descendants would find a way back to each other. For the first time in a long while, the room was filled with something other than cold silence. There was emotion, raw and real, hanging between us like a fragile bridge. That letter became the spark that ignited long-suppressed conversations. My parents began to talk about their fears and failures, the pressure they felt, the mistakes made, and the pain they had tried to hide. Lily, usually quiet and withdrawn, shared how lonely she had felt, how much she missed the laughter we once shared. We all cried, not just tears of sadness, but tears of relief. Relief at finally speaking the truths we had buried. That night marked a turning point. It was the inciting incident that set our family on a path toward healing. The unsent letter wasn't just words on paper, it was a beacon in the darkness, guiding us back to each other. But the journey wouldn't be easy. Old wounds needed time to heal, and trust had to be rebuilt from scratch. There would be setbacks, doubts, and moments when hope felt distant. Yet for the first time in years, I believed we could find our way back. Together. In the weeks that followed the night we read the letter together, a fragile hope began to take root in our family. It wasn't sudden or easy, more like a slow, tentative dance around old wounds and unspoken fears. But every small step mattered.
Mom started to open up more, sharing memories of her own childhood and the challenges she faced growing up with a mother who, like the letter said, had regrets and unhealed pain. These stories gave us a new perspective, painting our family history in shades I hadn't understood before.
Dad, who had always been stoic and reserved, began attending support groups for people dealing with unemployment and depression. He wasn't one for words, but seeing him take those steps made me realize how deeply the past few years had affected him. He confided in me once about his fear that he had failed us all. Lily surprised me most of all. She started joining me on evening walks, something we hadn't done since we were kids. We talked about school, dreams, and fears. She revealed how lonely she had felt, trapped in a house where silence was louder than words. I promised her we would work on bringing back the laughter. Meanwhile, I kept rereading the letter, trying to understand the emotions behind my grandmother's words. It was clear she had wanted to warn us, to heal us, but circumstances had stopped her. That made me determined to be the one to break the cycle. At school, I began writing about my family's story, not to expose anyone, but as a way to process everything. It helped me see that pain and hope can coexist, and that healing is often messy and imperfect. Despite our efforts, there were setbacks. Arguments flared, old grievances resurfaced, and sometimes the silence returned heavier than before. But the letter stayed with us, a reminder that love and forgiveness were still possible. I reached out to a counselor, hoping to bring some guidance to our family's fragile reunion. Slowly, sessions helped us communicate better, teaching us to listen without judgment and speak without fear. The letter, though unsent for decades, had finally found its voice through us. It reminded us that beneath the hurt, we were still a family. Imperfect, wounded, but willing to try. With every shared story, every tear, every cautious smile, the foundation for something new was being laid. Our journey toward healing was far from over, but the first steps were taken. Together. Just as the fragile bonds between us seemed to strengthen, life reminded us that healing was never a straight path. The pressures of daily struggles didn't disappear. Dad's job hunt dragged on, bringing frustration that sometimes bubbled into anger. Mom's health, neglected for too long, began to show signs of strain, leaving her exhausted and irritable. One evening, after a particularly tense dinner, voices raised more sharply than they had in months. Old accusations resurfaced like ghosts, accusing, blaming, and hurting all over again. The letter's hopeful message seemed to fade into the background as silence descended, heavier than before. Lily retreated further into herself. She stopped joining me on walks, preferring the solitude of her room. I worried she was losing faith in the change we'd all fought for. I felt overwhelmed, caught between wanting to hold the family together and feeling powerless against the weight of our problems. The pain I thought we had begun to heal seemed as raw as ever. At school, I struggled to focus. The friends I confided in tried to support me, but I felt isolated by the complexity of my family's turmoil. One day, I found myself staring at the letter again, desperate for guidance. The words my grandmother wrote about forgiveness and hope now felt like a distant dream, almost impossible to reach. Still, I refused to give up. I reached out to a trusted teacher and shared my struggles. She encouraged me to keep communicating with my family and reminded me that healing is a process with many setbacks. Together, we organized a family meeting, a safe space to speak honestly without judgment. It wasn't easy. Tears flowed, anger flared, but beneath it all, the desire to reconnect was undeniable. We talked about the fears that kept us apart, fear of rejection, of being misunderstood, of facing the pain we had buried too long. For the first time, those fears were spoken aloud, lessening their power over us. Though the journey felt like 2 steps forward and 1 step back, this moment marked a breakthrough. We weren't perfect, but we were trying. And that effort was enough to keep hope alive. The unsent letter, once forgotten, was now a symbol of resilience. It reminded us that even when all hope seemed lost, love could find a way to shine through the darkest times. After the storm of difficult conversations and emotional confrontations, a quiet transformation began to take hold within our family. It was subtle at first, a glance exchanged, a small gesture of kindness. But it grew steadily, like the first light of dawn breaking through a long night. One afternoon, I found Dad sitting in his old armchair holding the letter. He looked up as I entered the room, his eyes softer than I'd seen in months. "Your grandmother. She was wiser than I ever realized," he said quietly. That moment sparked a change. Dad started sharing stories about his own childhood, about the pressure he felt to be strong and silent, and how that shaped the man he had become. For the first time, he showed vulnerability, and it was a gift to all of us. Mom began to prioritize her health, attending regular checkups and even starting gentle exercise classes. She told me how reading the letter reminded her of her mother's strength and hopes, and how she wanted to pass that legacy on to us. Lily, inspired by our family's slow healing, signed up for a community theater group. She said it helped her find her voice and gave her a way to express feelings she couldn't always put into words at home. At school, I continued to write, now focusing on stories of resilience and family bonds. My writing teacher encouraged me to share my experiences, and I began to understand that my story could help others facing similar struggles. The turning point came unexpectedly during a weekend family picnic. We sat together under the spreading branches of an old oak tree, laughter slowly returning as we shared memories, jokes, and dreams. For the first time in a long while, it felt like we were truly together. That day, the unsent letter was no longer just a relic of the past. It was a symbol of our journey, a reminder that even when hope seemed lost, the power of love and truth could rebuild what was broken. We still had a long way to go, but something fundamental had shifted. We were no longer prisoners of our pain. We were partners in healing. In that shared moment of peace, I realized how much I had grown. The family I feared I had lost was slowly becoming the family I had always hoped for. Stronger, more honest, and full of the love that had never truly left us. The day of reckoning arrived quietly, without fanfare, but its weight settled heavily on my chest. Our family's fragile progress faced its greatest test yet, a crisis that threatened to undo all we had built. It began with a phone call that shattered the calm. Mom had collapsed at work and was rushed to the hospital. The diagnosis was serious, a condition that required immediate surgery and long recovery. In the sterile hospital room surrounded by the beeping machines and cold walls, fear gripped us all. The roles we had begun to redefine suddenly felt fragile again. Dad, who had started to open up, retreated into silence. Lily's eyes filled with tears she refused to shed, and I felt the overwhelming weight of responsibility, the desperate need to hold us together. But in those moments of deepest fear, the lessons from our journey surfaced. We gathered, hands clasped, sharing memories, hopes, and fears. The unsent letter lay folded on the bedside table, a quiet reminder of the love that had endured through generations. We talked openly for hours, breaking down walls we had built to protect ourselves. I saw my parents not just as my caregivers, but as human beings struggling with their own pain and vulnerabilities. When Mom awoke from surgery, weak but smiling, relief flooded through us. It was the first time we truly realized how much we depended on each other, not just as family, but as a source of strength and healing. In the days that followed, I witnessed a profound transformation. Dad stayed by Mom's side, no longer hiding his fears. Lily helped care for Mom with a tenderness that spoke of newfound maturity. And I learned to balance my own hopes with the realities of life, understanding that love sometimes meant simply being present. That emotional climax, born from crisis, revealed the true depth of our bond. The pain had not vanished, but it had been tempered by empathy and forgiveness. Through the darkest hours, the unsent letter became more than a message from the past. It became the foundation of our renewed family, reminding us that even in suffering, love could be our greatest salvation. The days after Mom's surgery were filled with quiet moments of reflection and newfound understanding. As she regained strength, our family began to heal not just physically, but emotionally and spiritually. Sitting together in the hospital room one afternoon, I watched my parents exchange a glance that spoke of forgiveness and hope. The tension that once defined our interactions had softened, replaced by a gentle patience and renewed commitment to each other. Lily, who had grown so much during these months, took it upon herself to organize family dinners. Simple gatherings where laughter was invited and silence no longer ruled. These dinners became our sanctuary, a place where we could be vulnerable and whole. The unsent letter, once hidden away and forgotten, now held a special place in our home. We framed it and hung it in the living room, a symbol of our journey and the strength that love provides when words fail. I realized that what I had learned at 18, about forgiveness, resilience, and the power of truth, had changed everything. Our family wasn't perfect, and our scars remained, but we no longer allowed them to define us. Instead, we chose to build on the foundation of love that my grandmother's words had rekindled. We had faced our darkest moments and emerged not broken, but united. Looking back, I understood that the unsent letter was never about fixing the past. It was about embracing it, with all its pain and beauty, and choosing to move forward together. That choice made all the difference. It taught me that even when hope seems lost, love has the power to heal and transform, if only we have the courage to open our hearts. Our family's story, once fractured and silent, became a testament to the enduring strength of forgiveness and the unbreakable bonds of love. And in that, I found peace, knowing that sometimes the most powerful messages are the ones left unsent, waiting for the right moment to be heard.